So most of us know that negotiating salary is really tough, and it's particularly tough when your potential employer doesn't answer questions you put forward. Today, I'm going to respond to a question on Reddit on how to handle just such a situation. Okay, so here is something from Lazy Purple on the negotiation Reddit. What to do when they blatantly ignore your question in email. Recently, I received an offer that was too low and politely replied, paraphrasing, quote, "Thank you, but unfortunately I can't accept that," with a simple question of how many conversions are you basing that figure on? No worries, are you able to share what you had in mind? Okay, so let's just stop there. My first piece of advice here, which is really not responsive, I'm going to do the same thing that this person was complaining about. I'm going to start by not responding to their question, but offering a little bit of coaching. When you're responding, saying thank you, but is probably not a great way to respond, particularly over email. The word but in negotiation is the great eraser, right? But is like saying no. And so even though you're starting by saying thank you, no one's going to remember the thank you. Everything is, but unfortunately, I can't accept that. So just as a way to improve email negotiation skills, I think it's really important to say, thank you so much for your offer. I really appreciate it. And then say, this offer is below what I'd be able to accept. But just getting rid of that word but and making the appreciation or the thank you piece more robust is really helpful. Because one of the other things we know is that in negotiation, appreciation is almost always one of the interests of the other side. And in fact, it costs us nothing. So saying, I appreciate the offer, really important. Okay, but now let's go on to this question. This person here, my friend Lazy Purple, is basically asking for what in negotiation we call criteria. When they're saying, how many conversions are you basing that figure on? They're basically saying, what is the criteria that you're using to come up with the number? And then the future employer is basically just saying, give me an offer, right? Or make me an offer. So it is in fact non-responsive. And what it is an invitation to haggle. It's basically saying, I don't want to throw out a number and you don't want to throw out a number. And in negotiation, right, this is the exact kind of thing we want to avoid. And it's really people being positional about what's going to happen next. So how do I address this? First thing I would say is, if at all possible, this should move off of email. This is going to be a much better conversation on the phone or on Zoom or in person. So I would just respond to something like this saying, I wonder whether it might make more sense to have a more fulsome conversation on the phone, or if we can connect via Zoom. Because then I'm going to have a lot more cues in terms of social cues, emotions, facial reactions, etc. And also I can really avoid getting into what I would call a process battle or haggle here. Okay, so let me continue with Lazy Purple's post, and I'm also going to look at some of the responses that Lazy Purple got to see what I think of them and which seem spot on and which could use some coaching. So Lazy Purple continues, I want a clarification on their valuation so we can move forward cooperatively. If this were in person, there's no way they'd be able to respond to my question this way without seeming super rude. So I gotta say, I disagree with that, right? I actually think lots of times in a negotiation, someone asks a question like, how did you arrive at that number? And then the response is something like, well, what would you be willing to do this for? And that's basically what this is, right? It's common and it's non-responsive, and you could see that just as well over email than in person. Now, I'm not disputing that Lazy Purple might find that to be rude, but I am disputing that it wouldn't happen. I think it happens all the time. Okay, but let's continue. So Lazy Purple says, but now I feel like a control freak if I respond, you didn't answer my question. Agreed, Lazy Purple. Saying that would be rude, unhelpful, and would probably reduce the likelihood that you're ultimately going to take this job. And even if you do take the job, it probably makes your future employer feel less excited about you. So Lazy Purple continues, I ended up responding with a polite explanation of why I need my question answered before I can give an accurate figure. Is this kind of question ignoring a red flag? So I love your question here, Lazy Purple, and I'm just going to say I don't think it's a red flag. I think it's a really common negotiation tactic. I don't think it's a great negotiation tactic. As I indicated, I think there's a way in which each side here is trying to be coy with each other instead of having a negotiation that's based on the party's interests and that's connected to relevant criteria. So it would in no way make me less interested in this job, but it would make me very much want to get on the phone or in person or on Zoom. Let's take a look at what some of the responses that Lazy Purple got are. So here's a response. It says, you could get back to them with a range of numbers rather than a flat figure, straight out of the Chris Voss playbook, but it can work. Make sure the lower number is the absolute lowest you're willing to accept and that the highest number is not unreasonable. So obviously this is a way to move forward. It would not be my coaching. This is exactly what the potential employer wants this employee to do, or potential employee to do. It's exactly what they're inviting Lazy Purple to do. And the problem in my mind here of without tagging this to any real criteria or any kind of norms is that there's an arbitrariness about it. Sure, I could put a very high low number and a very, very, very high high number and at least know I'm going to get something that works for me. On the other hand, I think what you've essentially signaled is I'm willing to work for the lowest possible number. Now, a good employer on the other side will probably not say, okay, then the lowest possible number. They'll probably counter with something a bit higher than that to make you feel good. But I still don't think this is the way to go. Okay, but let's look at what some of the other responses are. Okay, here's one, right? It says, pick up the phone and ask them. People undervalue the importance of a phone call. There is no avoiding a question easily on a phone call. You can avoid emails or postpone them, but getting them on the spot gives you a lot more information about them. So again, there's a piece of this that I agree with and a piece of this that I would dissent from. Based on what I said earlier, I absolutely agree that doing something on the phone makes sense or doing something on Zoom makes sense. What I wouldn't do is just call them out of the blue and put them on the spot. I would write back and suggest a time to call. And the reason why is I want the other side to be prepared. It's actually not to my benefit to catch them off guard. Maybe they'll be off guard in a way that will work to my advantage, but maybe they'll be annoyed. And even if they're not annoyed, they're just not prepared. And if they're a good negotiator, they're going to say, I need to get back to you. So I think it's much better to actually schedule the time so that both of you are prepared for the negotiation. So here's another response. It says, how about saying this? I'll have a better idea when I know what numbers you're basing your figures on. How many conversions was that? So this response here, I think, is coaching that says, I don't want to answer your question until you answer my question. And I think the tone here is friendly and I like it. On the other hand, I think we're not really addressing the fundamental challenge here, which is that in some sense, both sides here are kind of talking past each other. And there's a danger of getting positional here. It's like, I'll answer your question once you answer my question. And there's a way in which, right, I think that the employer here is purposefully avoiding the question. So I appreciate the tone. I appreciate the sentiment. Probably from my perspective, I avoid this because I think what I want to really avoid is getting positional about the process. Okay, so now that I'm done critiquing all of these, what would I say when I actually get on the phone? I think what I would say is, thank you so much for taking the time, and I'm really excited about the prospect of working with you. I know we have to work out an appropriate salary, and I know the number you sent forward is one that doesn't work for me. So I'd say something like, the number you put forward is not one that can work for me, but what I was hoping to do today is understand a little bit more what your number was based on, share from my perspective what an appropriate number might look like, and the reasons for that, in the hope that we can come up with something that feels fair, appropriate that can work for you and also can work for me. Okay, so thanks so much for watching, and please stick around to watch this next video. This is a collab I did with my friends at Mended Light, and it's a look at Ted Lasso. Also, if you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel, like this video, and ring the bell so you'll never miss new content from me. Okay, don't ignore me, keep watching.